Hi, right. Welcome to this meeting. So, Will, would you just like to introduce yourself briefly for anyone who may not know you and might watch this recording back, and then Kate in a moment.
Hello, Will Swaithes. So I'm currently, I guess, a freelance consultant in the world of PE. I've been teaching PE since 2001. Moved around a number of schools in Nottinghamshire. Was lucky enough to be an AST for a period of time, which meant probably I got the best CPD ever, which was go and watch other people teach and help them reflect on what was good, bad, and ugly in it.
Yeah.
And that led me to move around a few schools. Ended up assistant head for teaching and learning at one that had been placed in special measures. It was in special measures before I got there, and thankfully me and quite an injection of new staff helped change the culture in the school around professional development and quality of teaching, I suppose, but also engaging the kids in that context. And I was just looking to move schools, and Youth Sport Trust, who aren't a school at all, were advertising for a post. So I joined Kate at YST for 4 exciting years, and I'm now just coming to the end of a 2-year Masters in Educational Leadership, trying to invest a bit more in me, and back working closely with schools, particularly 2 teaching school alliances in Nottingham. Still doing a load of work for the YST whenever they'll have me. And yeah, just written a textbook for GCSE PE. So I think when I started teaching, I thought the most important thing in school was exam classes and results. And it was only later in my teaching career that I guess the penny dropped for me that it's about the rest of them that are far more important than the little Will Swaithes. And in fact, the less big Will Swaithes we have in this world, the better. So trying to change, I guess, my approaches and my teaching style and what I talk about. And I typically use the exam stuff as my route in to talk about the stuff I'm more passionate about, which is kind of how do we inspire every kid to have a love of movement.
Yeah, brilliant. Right. Great introduction. Thank you. And Kate.
Yeah, so I am head of PE at YST, head of PE and achievement, should I say. I also used to teach, started my teaching career in 1998 as a teacher of girls PE. Since then, I've worked in 4 completely different secondary schools, head of girls, head of PE, director of sport, director of specialism, and then sat on SLT in charge of teaching and learning, and looking at accredited pathways from 14 to 19 and different ways of learning. And we had, back in the day, we were piloting a new course like the diploma in PE that came out at the time then. We were one of the first batches through to give that a go as well. But I think the most exciting time in my life within the world of teaching was when we were a sports college. And I got to then work and develop the CPD of primary teachers with the PE advisor within Sefton, where the school was based. So I had the wonderful pleasure of working in 4 primary schools each week, working alongside teachers and with the little ones to get their engagement in learning and physical education there. And as Will says, that love of movement. And we very much approached it through the physical literacy before physical literacy was really spoken about. We really did start to look at that and the bigger meaning of the word. And then moved across into YST, where I predominantly worked on the physical literacy programs of work and in our primary space, looking at, again, putting the child at the heart of what we do, and very much around the development of the me's, the thinking me, the social me, healthy me, personal me, all the me's. And that's what we do at YST, really making sure that physical education is very much around, the phrase that everyone's using at the moment is the E in PE. And I have to be fair to YST, we've always said that the E in PE is just as important as the P in PE. And I suppose this time that we're in now is really bringing that to life in the situations that not only our youngsters in the home are facing, but also when they do go back into those school environments, whenever that may be, that E and P will be stronger than ever. And that's what I've nailed my colours to the mast and always have done and always will, really.
Great. So between the 2 of you, lots of experience in PE, different contexts, and leadership as well. So you've got what the thinking is from above head of department level, I suppose, when they're thinking about returning to PE and what PE should be. So just for those of us internationally outside of the UK, what's your impression of PE at the moment in the UK as schools have returned and over the coming couple of months and in September, what do you think it's going to look like?
Do you want me to go in, Will? Or? I think we've got a bit of I think there's a mixed picture at the moment, and to be fair, schools are only just starting to approach this new stage of phased return. We've still obviously got the key workers in some schools, and some schools have never closed. And physical activity has been used a lot with the key worker children in that space, but it's very different to physical education. I think what we will start to see now as the phasing of children goes back is to see how much can be done with the subject, but also then the value that is put on the subject, very much as you just talked about at the leadership level. Because I believe that physical education has a huge part to play in bringing the PE and bringing the school community back together, and to sort of break down some of those barriers that are there now, the social interaction, the fears, the anxieties. PE could be a great way to really unite the school community back together again. But it's very difficult in doing that with some of the social distancing measures that are in place. We have actually spoke to quite a lot of schools in considering what role PE will play when those schools do open up. And I think it's very different in each school. So I don't think there's necessarily a one size fits all. And I don't think it ever should be, because it absolutely has to be around the children and those behaviours that those children are showing, how we can use the subject to bring them out of those behaviours and really start to talk to them around how they're feeling and through the physical. And there are so many creative ways of doing that, and there's loads of some brilliant examples out there from various organisations, but actually from the PE profession themselves. They've actually stood up and said, you know, we're going to think about our subject and the way our subject can be taught to achieve these wider things. So I don't actually think there is one way of doing things, and there never is that one way. But I think the experiences need to be very personalised to each school and those individuals there. I think we won't see the structured PE lessons that we've seen prior to COVID-19 because of the various restraints that need to be in place, and the bubbles, and those bubbles that those children are going to be in are going to again look and feel very differently in schools, whether it's academic based, whether it's friendship based, whether, you know, whatever that bubble becomes is that bubble that those children are probably going to move around in. So PE will look very different for those bubbles.
Great. Will, anything to add?
I guess certainly from a across England perspective, I'd say the thing that Kate's touched on there is this is almost amplified the conditions in the country in terms of it is very fragmented. So
yeah,
I've been lucky enough to see through YST, and there's lots of schools that are engaged with them, how many are really innovative about their curriculum offer, about the pedagogical approaches they use, etc., etc. But there are also just as many schools stuck in the dark ages a little bit in terms of the practice that they use. So COVID, I guess, has led to the innovative and forward thinking and good middle leaders that are able to win hearts and minds, being able to really position the subject to do more, to be more, to deliver against whether it be the physical, the social, the emotional aspects of learning that are really important for kids, and probably more so now than ever. But then at the same time, we've got lots of schools I'm hearing where they're saying that, you know, they're finding the idea of returning to PE just too tough. So they're just, core PE won't exist. I think a lot of schools are in that, or a lot of us in this country are still in that mindset of planning to do what Boris has asked for, which is in England, a touch point for year 10s and 12s in year 6 and early years before the end of term. The autonomy is with the school leaders to decide how is best to do that in their context. So some of them are going, we're going to have bubbles, we're having them in, we've got a lot of vulnerable children, we want them in regularly. For others, you know, I've spoken to a few grammar schools that have literally gone the approach, we're going to have one touch point with a form tutor that's going to offload a load of work on them, and they're going to go away and crack on. Independent schools, where I guess maybe similar to the sorts of schools that you work with, where there's real challenge around fee paying and what the parents expect back from that, the return on investment, the staff have been furloughed, so a whole kind of can of worms and variety. And I guess in the schools that are returning, whereas in Wales it's been you're returning on this date and kids are in England it's been head teachers, you have autonomy to make the right decision. And I'm glad I'm not a head teacher right now, because
Yeah.
whilst it's nice that they're being trusted to make the decisions for the kids in their context, the buck is going to stop to a certain extent with them and the choices that they make.
Yeah.
So how do you balance risk of how many of them for my staff and for my students do I want them in and to return to education, versus how much do I need to protect them? And for a lot of them, I think they're seeing the risk of PE as potentially too big. And I would be going, PE's never been needed more than right now. And if the PE profession have got anything in their locker in terms of skill set, it's about managing risk, considering safety, but figuring out, a pragmatic approach to trying to do something. So I think between now and the end of the summer, we're going to see perhaps a third of our schools doing something interesting in terms of their PE provision that's more than just physical activity. For me, the bigger worry is there's almost this assumption that it'll be returned to normal in September, and it really won't.
It won't.
So, there's no point in doing too much planning for September now, because it could be wasted energy. But classes of, I know schools that teach classes of 35 in their top set in a secondary school, and that's not going to happen next academic year, and certainly not before Christmas. So what is that going to look like? Changing rooms are probably the riskiest place in the world on a normal day, let alone right now. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think I want to pick up on what Kate said about the value of PE, and then you've spoken about risk there. And I think as, a head of department and other middle leaders, I think it's probably I feel like it's my job to get this sort of solutions presented to our senior team. We can do PE, this is what it can look like, because they probably, like you said, they probably haven't got the headspace to think about PE, and they've got so many other things to do. And it could be an easy decision one day in a meeting that they've got lots on the agenda that they say, let's just not do PE for a term or something, and that can't happen. And that's part of this, is getting the message out there to people to say, look, this is how we can do it, and this is safe, but it's just going to be different, and that's fine. Yeah. So I was reading, one of my favorite things that's come from the Youth Sport Trust is the delivery principles. That document, I love that. Concise, to the point, gives you guidance to help make your decisions. What was the thinking behind that? How did you put it together? I particularly like the part of it that says use activity to improve well-being, as it's not PE as we know it. So, Kate, could you tell us more about that document and what it says?
Yeah, absolutely. We knew that our practitioners would really want to have some solutions of how they could deliver purposeful PE in a safe way. But we very much we've never gone down the line as an organisation of being prescriptive. We've always gone through the route of the learner and saying, well, what are the needs of those learners? So we approach it from very much, well, what are the behaviours these young people are going to potentially be displaying, and how can we use activities within physical education curricula to overcome and help them talk about these and to come out of them the other end, and trying to be creative. So it's not prescriptive, it's suggestions, basically suggestions and ideas of activities that could be done safely and can be adapted to that school environment, preferably an outdoor space where achievable. But it was very much, again, putting the child at the heart of what we were doing, and making sure that people weren't just trying to pick up with a curriculum that they would be delivering because it was the summer term or because it was the autumn term. Yeah. During lockdown, we did create resources that were based around activities that were traditionally taught in the summer term, so that learning could still continue to try and support the physical education journey from home. But for this one, we wanted to really approach it very, very differently. And basically try and challenge teachers to think about what their children were going to come back with, what were their concerns, and to look at that definition of physical literacy, because we know, lockdown has been an extension of a summer holiday in some ways. We know that when we leave children at the end of July in the UK and pick them up in September, there is always a drop off from where they left us in July. And this has been no different. It's just been magnified.
Yeah.
So when you look at the definition of physical literacy, yes, physical competence is in there, but it's around those motivations, it's around that responsibility, it's around finding your thing that is going to keep you going so you stay physically active for life. And I think what I've been observing during lockdown is obviously the nation has become more physically active.
Yeah.
And it's trying to find out what have people gone to. So at home, yes, I've got 3 kids here, all love physical activity and their PE, but they all do different things to keep them going. So I think that was the most important thing to get the message back in through teachers is you've not just got to find that one thing, you need to think differently now around what you're going to teach and what experiences you're going to give those young people so that they feel confident about themselves, that they feel they can pick up a piece of equipment, they can do something with it, and actually feel relevance and purpose in what you're actually doing with them. It's not just an activity that we're going to carry on with. There's real purpose behind what you're actually going to be doing with them. So things like the yoga and the Pilates, different activities, some traditional teachers will never have gone down this route. Actually, now's the chance to have a look at those types of activities, to see the difference they can make to some individuals. Not everybody will love them, but it's got a relevance and a purpose to overcoming a behaviour that somebody might demonstrate and somebody might show within your class. And certainly activities where we wanted to try and bring activities out that you could really try and encourage a conversation, you could encourage reflection, because the learnings we've had from certainly like Jess over in China has shared with us, that when the children came back in, they didn't talk, they didn't know how to communicate, they didn't know how to have a conversation. So what we've tried to do is to provide opportunity for teachers to think about, well, how can I teach something in a way where children can still have a conversation, can still do the learning, can still do the reflection, but actually, and it's not around the physical that we're trying to develop. We're trying to develop the emotional and the social, because if we get those right, the physical will then come. The physical is a bit of a barrier at the moment. So let's work on the things that we can develop, which is the emotional, social side of things, and very much around that holistic model of well-being. We know lockdowns affected children in very many different ways. We know there's children out there who have been living with trauma, whose parents may have been on the front line and have come home with various experiences. We also know there's some very, very vulnerable children in households that are not prepared for this and haven't got space to play and haven't got space to move away from each other. And that will be a pressured situation for children. Bringing them back into a safe environment in school, we've got to think about how can we get them to talk about and express their emotions so we have a real understanding of where they need to go next with their learning. It is very much that recovery curriculum. It's not catch up. It absolutely is not catch up. It's where are they now so we know what they need next, not what they have missed, and how do we catch them up. I think that's where YST really wanted to go with this.
I like that recovery curriculum. It's a good way of thinking about it.
Carpenter was the one that cloned the phrase, and
right.
I think we all kind of jumped onto it, and there is purpose with it.
Yeah. Will, Kate was talking a lot there about a mindset shift. And I know that Lewis and Alan did the blog they did about talking about, great, there's no sport, so therefore our curriculum doesn't have to focus on, helping the football team or anything like that. What, just to drill it home, what type of mindset change would you think middle leaders and teachers of PE need to think about in terms of their planning and their delivery?
Well, and I guess part of why you've reached out, Ed, is through the fact that I've had this curriculum design school that I've been running online, and I just saw an opportunity really to try and connect with a load of people that were keen to move their practice and their PE department's practice forwards, but have never really had the time to invest in it. And I guess the biggest thing I wanted to take to them, but also the biggest thing I've learnt back from the 80 or so that have been going through that process with me, is that massive disconnect they seem to have between their curriculum intent when they're really asked to dig into it, and whether that be, as Kate said, the lifelong love of movement, or physical literacy as the number one ambition. A lot of them talk, once you drill under the surface, that's the thing that they want for all children. And even if it was a passion for sport, they use sport in its broadest sense, and therefore it still makes sense. And I think the penny drop moment for a lot of them has been, so you clearly do have some clear principles and values that you want to deliver against, Now let's look at the minutiae of an individual lesson or even a series of lessons. How much of that, I guess, pays forward into that? And so often it doesn't. It's been this very, direct instruction, skill and drill driven lesson that has a focus on the stuff that's easy to measure and the stuff that's easy to see improvement in, rather than some of the softer skill stuff. So I've always been a big believer in the deficit model, the idea of if you know where you want to get to at the end and this well-rounded person, actually, what's your biggest limiting factor towards that at the moment? So if we said it's physical literacy, is it your movement competence or your confidence or your motivation or your knowledge and understanding as to why that's important? Which of those four is your biggest deficit? And when I talk to PE teachers, I go, well, imagine you're running a marathon, you're trying to do your 2-hour marathon. It's probably Nike trainers that are the biggest blocker for you that's stopping you getting. But assuming you've got the Nike trainers on, it's either your muscular system, the lactic acid burn in your legs, or it's going to be your heart and it's beating out your chest, or it's going to be your lungs and you can taste blood, or it's going to be your mindset and your brain goes, this is hard, and you slow down. Because all of the evidence suggests the body can do so much more than we ever empower it to do. So I'm going, well, actually what we want for children, we're aiming towards the same endpoint, but we need to try and help them figure out which of those four, it's not those body systems, is it your brain, your cognitive state, is it your physical sense, is it your social connection, is it your resilience, your mindset? Which of the aspects that can be really well delivered or developed in PE, which is letting you down the most? And then how do you tailor the lesson to help with that? And I think, like Kate said, where schools have been getting that right, they've had a curriculum that has real purpose, has real meaning to kids. There's some choice within it. There's some freedom. The kids are really empowered into what they're doing. And as a consequence, those children are now at home choosing ways to empower themselves. So, I'd have been a really keen squash player. Well, I can't play squash right now, but I've just joined the local tennis club because I can play tennis. But pre-tennis, I was doing more daily walking and engaging in classes that I'd not really done before. My wife's a physio. She's been moaning at me for not looking after my hamstring flexibility, etc. So 3 times a week I've been doing Pilates. So because I have a mindset where I want it and I know where my weaknesses are, I'm willing to seek out and find it. And I guess where schools have been struggling is where they've had a very fixed mindset and model of you will do this and you will do that, that the minute you take that structure away, the children do nothing because they haven't thought through why they would do it for themselves. That makes sense.
Yeah. So
I think that goes back to what you were saying about the leadership of the subject as well, and how much we can touch on here, how much the subject is valued by SLT and the head teacher. So if you really understand what physical education is about, you can change mindset, you can change outcomes by the how and the why, not necessarily the what. That becomes irrelevant. But what we've got to try and do is move away from a traditional model of we've always taught this here and we've taught it in this way, because actually we're not, the starting point is very, very different at the moment. We need to think about why we're doing it and then how we're doing it through the what. So I think, some really great stuff there, Will, on mindset, massive when these children do come back into whatever school looks like.
Yeah, I think as teams, as PE teams, you've really got to look at your context and discuss what is our job now? Before that was our job. Has our job changed as a result? I mean, here, our kids would have had 6 months off school. When you're looking in places like Hong Kong, they haven't got outdoor spaces. They can't go to the tennis club, really. They've been in their apartment for a few months. So like you said, what is our job? I sort of imagine that they'll all come into the sports hall really excited and they'll all be interacting in this, that, and the other. And you've just told me this lady in China said that, it was a bit awkward. They didn't really know how to talk to each other. So, we've got to prepare for this and think about this.
And for me, I guess what they need first is to feel safe, don't they? And it's always been about that, but never more so. And safety beyond, don't throw javelins at people. It's safety about emotional safety as well. I guess the next aspect of that is that they want a sense of connection, and that's what's been missing. So how can we create a sense of connection that is safe, i.e. socially distanced or whatever, and that kind of that sense of belonging and feeling a part of something bigger, that and I guess for a lot of that, I think fun is the gatekeeper to make people feel a connection. But how do you create fun at the same time as being safe? And that's that tightrope that everyone's going to have to walk and find a way, particularly for you middle leaders, to think, how can I create a fun and safe, slightly wider path that all my teachers, I feel comfortable that they can be within these parameters and it will be okay.
Back to play, isn't it? It's okay not to be okay, so therefore it's okay to go back to rediscovering who we are and what we are about, and having fun is absolutely crucial to that. And if you put play, if you were to say play to people in secondary PE, they wouldn't really want to necessarily go there, but actually play is the bit that keeps us stimulated and keeps us engaged and gives us that social connectedness. So what role can play have within whatever PE looks like when we move back into the school environment? And it's things like playground games that are socially distanced, where we can still have fun, we can still have learning, but the laughter is there, the safety net of everybody being together is there, and the ability to laugh and observe enjoyment again. And that's then when we'll be able to start to take, some more steps. But it's okay to play. Nothing has to be necessarily as structured as a sport would necessarily be.
Yeah. Well,
I'm going to have to go, but Kate, you've just prompted me that in my session I'm doing just now, two of the things are talking about play, and I've just pulled up the slide. It won't let me share it with you, Ed. But no, it's fine. But I'm sharing a model with them, this idea of going, well, your comfort zone's there, but you've got to get into play before you get into purposeful practice. So whether that be for children to get better at their movement skills, etc., but actually right now we're talking about for teachers. We need to get them to do a bit of experimenting and trialing and sharing and talking about what within the parameters of safe and fun can they stretch to then get purposeful practice and doing more. So I'll send you the model.
Thank you. Well, thanks for joining us, Will. I know you've got to get off. Me and Kate hopefully can continue the discussion.
Take care.
Thanks, Will.
See you soon, Will.
Bye. So, Kate, in terms of what do you think will be, can you envision sort of January, March? I know, right? What do you think will be like some of the positives? Do you think what would you hope PE departments, say sports come back in, and we've got fixtures again, it would be so easy for people just to go back and bring that old program
where we left off.
Yeah, bring all that program of study back in, and what do you hope for?
For me, it is that E. It's those life skills. It's the character development. Really go into what the subject can actually bring out in people, because we're actually going to rely on this subject for bringing these people back together. So why would we move away from that when sport is allowed again and go back to the technical teaching of skills and drills and things like that? Absolutely around, the physical is important, but what I really would like to see is that value and purpose of PE is really reimagined, that we really as practitioners look to why it is that our subject is so special and what it can do for every single child, because not every single child is going to go on and be a sports star. I've got 3 kids, all very different, all abilities very, very different. One of them exceptionally talented, but all 3 of them love the subject for the different things that they get out of it. Now, for me, it's finding through PE everybody's thing, and we're not going to find that if we revert back to what we've always done. I think I'd love people to take this now, for the profession to take this time now to really consider why we do PE, what it can bring out and how it can bring out the best in people, but then making sure those life skills are transferable too, and that we do have then the right outlets for people whatever, for our young people, whatever it may be. So yes, if you have got a talent, you can go down a certain pathway. If you want to, for the love of movement and just for bettering yourself, you can still do that. If you want to go on and be a coach, you can still do that. So it's differentiation in the biggest sense of the word, making sure that our lessons don't just return to some of the traditional stuff that we had, that there is real learning outcomes that are based around the needs of the learner, as opposed to the physical development of a skill within that lesson. I'd love to see it back on the curricula in higher levels than it is now. More time for purposeful PE. I don't want more PE of what it is now if it means we're going to turn so many kids off. I only want more time on the curricula if people are going to really think about the value and purpose of physical education. What I don't want to see as well is that we see physical activity instead of PE. There is absolutely do everything through physical activity, but I want to make sure, you know, that we have a balance. And for me, it might be actually seeing physical activity in the curricula alongside physical education. If they think children need a little bit more physical activity, we put it in as well. We don't take it instead of physical education. Now, Joe Wicks has done a great job in getting people active and moving, but we know as practitioners that is very different to physical education. It mustn't be there instead of. So I think it's finding that balance. I think there's a lot of debate around the moment around the health and well-being, around a health-based curricula as well. I think now is the time where we can really tap into what lockdown has done and what impact lockdown has had on people's health and well-being, and seeing the ways that we can integrate that into our physical education curricula. We've also got a new RSHE curricula coming on board in September as well. How can we utilise that to really give those young people the understanding of health and well-being, so it comes out from all different angles in school, not just through physical education, but physical education becomes that subject that children absolutely love, not dread, because they understand why they're doing it and they ultimately find their thing through doing it.
Yeah, for me, I'm just trying to imagine being a student coming back to school, lesson 1 PE. Just hope that PE teachers do not just say, right, you've not done anything for months, bleep test, you know, circuit, high intensity, please.
Worst nightmare.
Yeah. It's going to turn them off. They're going to be anxious anyway. And I watched a session that Will did with the Youth Sport Trust a couple of weeks ago, and one of the guys he interviewed, I forget where he was from, but he spoke about sport is just one genre of PE, you know, and so now that it's sort of forced our hand that is not there anymore, you know, and we've been slightly pushed for many out of our comfort zone, and as PE teams we're going to have to talk about that, reflect on that, and try new things, like you say, about play and safety. And I think when I look forward to, you know, beyond Christmas, that, you know, my department, we will have changed I would have cracked some mindsets and changed some views, you know, and people will be like, oh yeah, actually quite like, you know, taking all the boys and doing, you know, some sort of more exploration type PE rather than prescriptive. So yeah.
We might get more children excited about sport though, because of the approach we take. And ultimately, if we, you know, we've seen an increase across the world in physical activity because it's helped people get through lockdown. So this is a moment to seize upon that. It's a moment for different organisations to come together to keep the momentum going now, the role that physical activity can play in developing that healthy mindset, but then transfer that into the school environment. Okay, we need to keep physical activity there, but we need to make sure that the physical education is appropriate to keep people engaged as well, so they see the right learning coming out of that. But also through that approach, I think we will keep more people engaged and wanting to have a go at different things as well, which is only got to be a positive. And we might actually see some teachers who've maybe not enjoyed physical education coming back into the school environment with a completely refreshed outlook on it as well, because actually they've experienced something through physical activity that they've found a love for, that they can then share with their pupils as well. Yeah. So for me, it's been a chance to reset. It's been a chance to think, and very much now as an organisation, we went from responding to COVID-19 and reacting to it, and now we're very much in that phase of recovery. How can we support schools and home in the blended learning approach. To touch on what Will was saying before, Jack, our eldest, he's year 10, so he is due to be going back into some form of formal education within the school setting, but that is changing weekly on what that's going to look like and feel like as COVID-19 starts to change course, or we know how to react and respond to it differently. And I think we've got to make sure that we are there to support schools and parents in what this blended learning is going to look like, because I think you're spot on, and Will is as well. It's not going to be back in September, business as usual, 30 in a class, carry on with your timetable. I still think there'll be some blended learning going on there, where the children are still at home for some part of their week doing home learning, and it's still making sure that home learning is purposeful as well.
Yeah.
But then when they get into the school environment, what does that look like, and how we can combine the two learning environments together? But I think that school environment is going to be crucial in the health and well-being and understanding where our youngsters are at. And it's those conversations, whether it's going to be with a form tutor or the head of year or however that may be, or in that bubble, really understanding the needs of each of those young people to try and support them on their next phase. And our Jack is anxious. He's very anxious about his GCSEs next year. He's anxious that he'll have lost over a term's worth of teaching. Well, what's going to happen to the GCSE specifications? Is content going to be cut? Are they going? I read somewhere yesterday that they might push the examinations back to July to give them that extra learning. We don't know, and I think at the moment there's a lot of unknowns out there that none of us can answer at the moment. So all our role is at the moment is being able to react and respond and support to what this current situation is, but be ready to support our young people, because they're the ones that need it in trying to alleviate their fears and just tell them that they are going to be supported and not to worry, because everybody's in this situation across the world. But I think it is certainly a chance to reflect and consider what next steps are going to be. But we've never had this thinking time before, Ed, and it's great to have it.
Yeah.
When a profession had so much time, so much sharing, so much on social media, so much willingness to help each other. Yes, there's been some competitiveness and people trying to sell things, put that to one side. I've been heartened by the stuff that I've seen on social media, the willingness to give this a go. Let me know, I'll give you this, you give me that. And that's great, because that's where we learn from each other. And for me, the international learning has been phenomenal, from the likes of where China were, to yourselves in Dubai, to what it's going to look like and feel like our friends in Holland have gone back today. So I'm keeping in touch with them to find out what their PE's looking like. We know that some schools are not going back in some countries, but it has brought an international community together. Definitely. And that can only be a good thing for our subject.
Yeah, definitely. I think you mentioned then there's lots of unknowns and we're going to have to react. And I think as PE teachers, middle leaders, if you're even senior leaders, keeping in touch with people around the world, reading guidance from different governments, and just equipping yourselves with as many tools as possible for when your directive comes down from your senior team or from your government, wherever you are, you sort of know, you've got experience to draw on already, from other places. Sitting tight and not listening and hoping it's just going to be how it was, I think is going to be, tying a noose around your neck sort of thing. So what would be you've been a senior leader before, what would be your top tips for middle leaders in PE?
Right, the first thing I would do is make sure you are absolutely up to date with your latest government guidance, because that absolutely guides what you can and can't do. So that is a non-negotiable, that your risk assessments are in place, that your risk assessments have been agreed with school or whatever structure your school's in, whether it's multi-academy trust, whether it's a British international school, whatever it may be, that you have followed what your school have asked you to do. My second ask would be to ensure that you are up to date with the Association for Physical Education COVID-19 guidance as well, because they have really taken it and been able to give some particulars around where to help you as a professional, really, to ensure that what you're doing is the right thing. So they're the two legalities I think you should really ensure that you're okay with. I really like the way YST have gone about it with the suggestions and the ideas. And for me, what drove that was what your children need. So that's my third thing. Once you know your legalities, what you can and can't do, what do your children need? And if you know what your children need, you can then set the intent of your curricula that you're going to deliver to make sure
you've got that why first.
Absolutely. Why has to be there. And it isn't going to, it's really not picking up where we left off. I can't stress that enough. It's really reacting and responding to what your young people need. And then think creatively. Forget your schemes of work. Forget all your lesson plans. Think about the here and the now, and how can you work with those bubbles, or whatever those bubbles are going to look like, to overcome those needs of those young people. And go back to what Will said, the fun, the play, the activities that are going to galvanise and get children socialising, connecting and talking again, because that is the starting point. And think about those activities that bring those skills out of people, where you can really get them to come out of themselves. Things like the outdoor activity stuff, the scavenger hunts, the orienteering, where they can be done socially distanced, they can be safely, but we are communicating all the time, we're problem solving, we're learning about ourselves, where we can start to develop some resilience. You know, some kids will have had to have been very, very tough through this process, and others will have had quite an enjoyable experience of lockdown. So it's sharing the learning, because these kids have been away from each other, as you say, for 12 weeks for some of them, if not longer, and they need to get to know each other again, and they need to be tolerant of the situations that the children are in, and we can only learn that through talking. So take it as an opportunity to get those talking and communications really happening through whatever activities you put together, but just make sure it's absolutely about fun. And then with your department, make sure you do have those conversations around how they're feeling as staff, trying to deliver some of these activities as well. You know, we often talk about the lack of confidence in some of our primary practitioners who aren't PE specialists in going and teaching a sport or an activity. We actually might now have PE specialists who might be feeling a little bit less confident because they're not going out and teaching their sport, and they're having to think about things differently. It's okay to feel like that. And that's why you're a department. You're a department to share and care and talk these things through. There is no right way. Whatever way you decide to do something will be right for your young people. So please don't feel that you're going to be criticised from anybody else. You will do things for what your young people need and talk about it. That's all I would say, just keep talking.
I know I'm going to be feeling exactly like that when I'm teaching dance or early years PE come September, October, because that's what we're going to have to do when we split the classes up, and we need to be more flexible with our timetables. Great advice.
It's out of our comfort zones, and as you say, we may have mixed age classes as well, depending on what those bubbles look like. So our differentiation skills are going to have to be through the roof.
Yeah, that's right. And we will come out better teachers for it.
Absolutely. Completely believe that. Out of adversity always comes an opportunity.
Yeah, I was always a secondary PE teacher, and then I moved to my current school, and I had to teach mainly primary, and I was really nervous about it. Now I probably enjoy primary teaching more than secondary teaching. So, you know, it's always good to be pushed into these circumstances. My final question for you, Kate, is where can people keep up to date with content from the Youth Sport Trust within COVID-19, but also guidelines elsewhere as the situation develops? Because we're going to have to update those risk assessments. We're going to have to update our approach regularly.
Absolutely. So YST website, we actually have a space as soon as you go into our homepage. So www.youthsporttrust.org. If you click onto there is a special section specifically around COVID-19, and that's split into home learning that you can set your children who are in the home space, the principles, the ideas and the suggestions for both primary pre, secondary, special education, so where you're working with children with special educational needs. There's a lot of guidance there as well, things you can do differently to make sure things are fully inclusive, because, you know, we might still have teachers with different groups that they've never worked with before, where you've got learning needs that you've never dealt with before as well, so there is support there. But also through our website, we do signpost out to the information that the Association for Physical Education put out there, that Department for Culture, Media and Sport have out there, national.gov.uk. Anything to do with any legalities and signposting is on our website. And I keep in touch with people like Active Partnerships, because they have information as well. We always touch base with Sport England to make sure anything that is coming out around sport and your national governing bodies and their guidance, because that will change. We know when my kids play tennis, that those guidances have started to change again. So it is keeping on top of that. So literally a one-stop shop is the YST website. There's all sorts of stuff on there, whether it's curricular PE, whether it's physical activity in your playgrounds, whether it's extracurricular or whether it's sport, all your guidance can be found there. But there's also a section on health and well-being as well, and understanding the emotional and mental side of what we've been through, because I think that is the one thing we really need to get on top of. Where are our kids at through this?
Perfect. Thank you.